All right, so let's talk about what the commander in grief has been bitching about this week. Well, one of the things. With all of the stuff happening in the world, this guy wants to bring up more culture war BS and demand name changes for the Washington Footballers and the Cleveland Guardians. And as usual, in the middle of his rant, he just straight up lies to prove a point that he doesn't need to make. The lie in this post is his statement that our great Indian people in massive numbers want this to happen. Now, if you take a quick glance at an article from Reuters, a respected and fairly balanced news organization, you can see that the numbers are not on Trump's side. Reuters tells us that there are two major Native American organizations that have condemned this statement, and one group that claims to support the idea. But if you do a deeper dive on these groups, you begin to see how the one that's in favor of this demented demand is pretty much full of shit. First strike against them, their name. It's the Native American Guardian Association. NAGA. Yeah. NAGA. Gross. This group is problematic for many, many reasons, but let's just take them at their own word. If you go to the NAGA website, I refuse to say that Trumpy word again, there's a second red flag that smacks you right in the face. It's alarming with all of the problems facing Americans in general, and Native Americans in particular. The giant banner on their main page tells you to support the racist-ass team names they want to bring back. So the next strike against them comes when you click on the History tab. For most organizations, this is where they state when the group was founded and what they have accomplished during their existence. NAGA, though, just has one sentence that is misleading at best. This is significant for a couple of reasons, but we'll come back to that in a bit. So then, if you click on the subpage for misconceptions, this is where things start to get extra Trumpy. One of the subheadings in here says, Redskins is racist. They're trying to make the claim that it's not a racial slur when it most definitely was, and sadly still is, used in a derogatory manner. Now, the next one that requires going down another section of the rabbit hole we're in is this tab that says, Disputing Native 90% Approval. This one is full of half-truths and suppositions. Namely, they refer to a 2004 poll from the Annenberg Public Policy Center and a 2016 poll from the Washington Post, which both state that 9 out of 10 respondents of Native American heritage had no problem with the term redskin. But as you may suspect, there are issues with lumping these studies together. If you go to the Washington Post article they link, one of the first things you read is that the Annenberg study was flawed because of a lack in diversity of people polled. But if you read further down, there's also an issue with the Washington Post's poll based on asking how the respondents identified themselves as Native American. Now, to their credit, the Washington Post published an article along with this poll, which shares thoughts from 12 of the people they interviewed. I'm only going to show you 3 of them to illustrate the wildly differing feelings on the subject. Starting with this woman, Michelle Anderson, who identifies as Cherokee. I don't want to sound like a dick, but the responses she gives makes it sound like she's absolutely clueless. The headline quote alone makes you wonder if she's ever talked to any other Native people, because I'm pretty sure there are plenty of folks older than her that have a real problem with this name. She goes on to say that she was totally fine being called Pocahontas when she was growing up, which is whatever. But what really shows this woman's ability to just go along with whatever the cool kids are doing is when she says, I feel it's something that has become synonymous with fair play and good, healthy, competitive sports. It's part of the American way. Yeah, and so was slavery. Next, let's look at someone who seems to have a little more going on upstairs. Clark Lee Walker identifies as Comanche and studies Native American history, writes westerns, and is a descendant of a famous Native chief. You can read his words for yourself, but I think the most important and common sense bit is the headline. It's as antiquated as it is offensive. Yeah, I'm a middle-aged white dude, Clark, and I totally agree. The last one I want to show you is a bit more on the hardcore end of the spectrum. This dude, Orville Blevins, is somewhat ambivalent on the term itself, but definitely does not mince words when it comes to how he feels about white people's treatment of Native Americans. For my money, his two most powerful statements are when he says, "We don't want nothing from the white man. Just leave us alone. You've done taken enough from us." And then, specifically referring to the Commander's owner, Daniel Snyder, Orville says, "This guy could buy and sell all of us." Damn. Okay, so let's take a look at one of the main sources for the error-riddled NAGA Wikipedia page from earlier. This is an article from Sports Illustrated in 2020. The article is very enlightening and goes pretty deep on the controversy surrounding the name change of the Washington football team. I suggest reading it if you want to go deeper on this. The writer's premise is that Snyder started an NPO in 2014 that claimed to provide financial support for Native American communities, conveniently right around the time the calls to change the football team's name started getting too loud to ignore. But as with most charity groups that are started as either tax write-offs or PR distractions, Snyder and his group pretty quickly fell off the face of the earth after 2 years of giving a little bit of his fortune to a handful of tribes or Native organizations. Oh, and of course, they have a shitty name too. The Washington Redskins Original Americans Foundation. SI goes into the history of the group and their relationships with a few specific tribes, none of whom are associated with the team a mere 5 years later. They couldn't even be bothered to help out during the pandemic, apparently. The article also talks about the former head of this shady fake charity, Gary Edwards, who ran another grifty organization prior to coming on with WROAF. He was in charge of a group that was supposed to represent Native Americans in law enforcement and specifically recruit and hire natives to police on native lands. But really, he just set it up so that he, his wife, his mom, and some buddies could collect sweet six-figure annual salaries for doing next to nothing. One giant red flag that this group didn't really give any shits about helping Native Americans is the fact that they went to schools across the country, outside of native lands, mind you, to show support for and donate money to groups that were fighting against changing racist school mascots like Redskins or Indians, etc. They claim, as does NAGA, that it's because changing these names is erasing Native history from American culture. But come on. SI also sheds light on a newer poll that says more than half of Native Americans are offended by the Washington team's former name, a poll that is conveniently left off the NAGA page. Now, I did a terrible job highlighting one section of the article, but I wanted to clear up something from the NAGA wiki page. I am in no way defending those scumbags, obviously, but whoever wrote that entry got their signals crossed a bit. This page is describing the groups listed on a court briefing that tried to claim there are tons of Native Americans who totally love the Redskin name. 2 of the names listed on the brief had donation amounts from WROAF next to them, and one of these dollar amounts is the $68,000-ish that was attributed to NAGA. The article just mentions NAGA being listed on the briefing, but doesn't say anything about donations. In fact, SI goes on to mention that it's hard to trace donations going into NAGA, but there is almost too much conjectural evidence to ignore connections between them, WROAF, and the team. They even mention this gross episode where a NAGA rep wrote a children's book called How the Redskins Got Their Name. One very interesting takeaway from this article is that as late as 2020, NAGA still had language on its website's Origins of NAGA heading, which said, since the 1960s, Native Americans have fought to end negative stereotypes in the mainstream media while preserving heritage, history, and positive imagery. That statement is nowhere to be found today. I don't know if they were forced to take it down or did so on their own, but it's fairly misleading for a group that didn't exist before 2010. All right, enough of the toxicity. Let's get back to the 2 groups we mentioned earlier that are against this whole Trumpian shenanigan. First, we have the Association on American Indian Affairs, which is a real group that has really existed for over 100 years and really works to represent and make life better for Native Americans. The language on their website is about as far from the recycled right-wing grievances on NAGA's site as you can get. AAIA talks about fighting for dignity, sovereignty, self-sufficiency, and preserving culture. They give examples of programs that they promote which actively invigorate real Native American culture. They talk about protecting and uplifting and making connections. It's beautiful. They also talk about real issues among Native American communities, like recovering stolen lands and teaching the next generation of Native American children how to keep their culture and traditions alive. The other group from the Reuters article is the National Congress of American Indians, which has also been around since the early 20th century. NCAI has its own constitution and actually functions as a legislative body whose members come from Native American and Alaskan Native tribes all across the U.S. They also talk about a mission to preserve Native American heritage and culture in a tangible way. NCAI have some very informative resources on the website, including links to well-produced videos, one of which is directly applicable to this topic. All right, I'm going to stop yapping for a while, so let's listen to some video highlights from an academic study on Native-themed mascots, co-sponsored by NCAI. After that, I have another clip from a PBS video about the same topic, but presented in more of a mini documentary interview style. See you on the other side.
My name is Sierra Watt, and I will be providing an overview of the key findings of a recently published review on the health impacts of Native-themed mascots within academic peer-reviewed literature, recently published in the research journal American Indian and Alaska Native Mental Health Research. Overall, the review found that research into Native-themed mascots defined to include team names, images, and logos, as well as game day and fan rituals, showed detrimental impacts on the health of American Indians and Alaskan Natives. There has been a number of high-profile public opinion polls released showing a wide range of diverging views on these mascots and their impacts. Therefore, our research team, including myself, Dr. Ian Record, and Dr. Yvette Rubidoux, began this project to systematically examine what research existed and what that research revealed about the impacts of these mascots. The review used the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities Research Framework, which outlines how a variety of social determinants at the individual, family, community, and population levels can impact overall health disparities. The review analyzed research articles on Native-themed mascots during a 20-year period ranging from 1999 to 2019. Within the articles, 41 individual tests or studies were conducted. The review included studies involving American Indian children and Alaska Native children, American Indian and Alaska Native adults, and studies including a variety of racial and ethnic groups. Overall, the review documented research showing impacts harmful to the health of American Indian and Alaska Native individuals and communities. There were 5 primary findings within our review of existing research. For the past 20 years, research on Native-themed mascots generally shows that they cause direct health impacts, as well as impacts that contribute to overall American Indian and Alaska Native health disparities, and have the potential to harm American Indian and Alaska Natives across their lifetimes with some outlier publications. The research found harmful impacts for 3 different research participants. For American Indian and Alaska Native children, research on Native-themed mascots was shown to result in negative impacts to belief in oneself and community. For American Indian and Alaska Native adults, research findings included hampering American Indian and Alaska Native students' ability to learn on college campuses, lowering American Indians' belief in their ability to achieve future success, and that American Indian and Alaska Native mascot opponents were subjected to physical abuse and verbal aggression, including spitting and profanity, more frequently than non-American Indian and Alaska Native opponents. For research on a variety of racial or ethnic groups, research reviewed found more discrimination in evaluations for hypothetical American Indian and Alaska Native candidates for scholarships and jobs, more stereotypical expectations for what tasks a hypothetical American Indian would enjoy, and in response to the Native-themed mascot issue, some expressed a desire to punish American Indians through the ending of programs or through business boycotts. These examples show the ways in which Native-themed mascots can result in negative impacts to the health and social determinants of health for American Indian and Alaska Native people. Our second primary finding was that the vast majority of the research focused on multiple racial ethnic groups found that non-American Indian and Alaska Native individuals, in particular white research participants and sports fans, continue to express support for these mascots. However, research has also shown that training interventions can help to shift attitudes. The research has largely been undertaken in the field of psychology, we found, with results focusing on impacts such as discrimination, bias, and stereotyping. We hope that future research can continue to expand to include additional work from other fields and use other methods to explore the impacts from these mascots. Our fourth finding was that we found no support to the argument from mascot supporters that native-themed mascot opposition comes from a vocal minority of researcher activists. Rather, our review finds that the body of research in the past 20 years has been written by a wide array of researchers. Finally, our last primary finding was that the harmful impacts from native-themed mascots are not limited to names and images, but also include harm caused by game day and fan rituals. This review on 20 years of research of native-themed mascots shows that the evidence is clear. These mascots cause harm and contribute to health disparities, and their discontinuation is still needed. For more information, please email research@ncai.org, or to request NCAI's help at the K-12 or state levels with native-themed mascot removal, please email mascots@ncai.org.
So I'm happy to share my perspective on mascots. For me, the bottom line, I think we should just do away with human mascots, period. They're on a spectrum, and some are worse than others. Redskins, obviously there's a history, and although there are competing explanations of where that term came from, at least one of the dominant theories is that it came from a bounty placed on native people and scalping them for bounty, leaving them with a red skin. The two most common defenses I hear about using native mascots are that, hey, we think natives are really cool warriors, like Spartans and Trojans and things like that, and so we're honoring them. And the other is, I found a native person who said it doesn't bother them at all, so you should hush. So first of all, remember that the hometown fans, when they put on faux war paint and chicken feather headdresses and things like that, are these guys honoring, or are they just kind of playing Halloween? And I would say that most of the time they're just playing Halloween. Even something like an eagle feather, which has spiritual significance, in most tribes is an important sacred item, a bird that flies higher than all others, a way to honor somebody. It used to be that each eagle feather was earned with a military deed or other great deed for the people. Having that kind of turned into show or appropriated, misrepresented, whether it's a Victoria's Secret model or a mascot for a sports team, often rubs people the wrong way. Somehow, we need to have ethics around this and many other issues at the center of our national sports culture, because a lot of young people look up to our professional athletes and the teams they play for. And by putting racially divisive things at the center of our national pastime, you are teaching people to appropriate, not to listen to marginalized groups, and to be offensive. With regard to finding a native person who says it doesn't bother them, they're out there. But I don't know if you listen to country music. There's a Gretchen Wilson song, Redneck Woman. I'm a redneck woman, I ain't no high-class broad. Does that mean I get to call every white woman I meet redneck woman? And if somebody's offended, say, you have no right to be offended, because Gretchen Wilson loves that label. So if you can find a native person who says, redskin doesn't bother me, that doesn't mean you can ignore all the people who say it does. And most native people say it does. Over 100 tribes have passed resolutions formally repudiating the use of native imagery and mascots for sport teams. The National Congress of American Indians, which represents all of the federally recognized tribes, has passed a formal resolution repudiating the use of native imagery and mascots. And so it's important that we get the multiple perspectives. The ways we do that is with education, conversations, recruiting and developing a diverse workforce that has men and women, people from all kinds of racial backgrounds and groups, and we can all learn from each other. There are a lot of different ways that we can do this. We have to listen.
So, what do you think? And who are you going to believe? This guy and his followers? Or these people?